Okay, so get this. One of our listeners sent in this article about a statue they're thinking about swapping out in the U.S. Capitol building.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, and it's a bit of a head-scratcher.
Okay, I'm intrigued. Lay it on me.
So we're talking about potentially replacing a statue of a Confederate general, Edmund Kirby Smith, with Tim Tebow, the football player.
Tim Tebow. Wow. That's quite the juxtaposition.
Right, it definitely got my attention. We're going to do a deep dive into this and try to understand what's really going on here.
Sounds like a fascinating deep dive. Where do we even begin with this?
Well, the article mentions that this whole thing was Senator Marco Rubio's idea.
Right, Senator Rubio. I remember reading something about that. It definitely made a splash in the media, but I don't think there's been much movement on it beyond the initial proposal.
It just seems like such a strange choice on the surface. Like, I get that Tebow's a big name, especially for folks who follow football. But is that really enough to earn him a place in the National Statuary Hall? We're talking about a collection of statues representing some of the most important figures in each state's history. 2 from each state, I think.
Exactly. 2 per state chosen to represent their contributions to our nation's history and culture. So, yeah, the bar is pretty high.
So why Tebow? What's the argument there?
Well, Tebow's supporters really emphasize his character. They talk about his strong faith, his commitment to charity work, his overall positive influence, especially for young people.
I can see that.
They see him as a role model, someone who embodies good values.
But on the flip side, you have critics who say, hold on a second. Being a great athlete and a good person, that doesn't automatically qualify you to be immortalized in the U.S. Capitol building, right?
Right. They argue that his accomplishments in sports and philanthropy, while admirable, don't necessarily put him on the same level as historical figures who shaped the course of the nation.
Yeah, that's a good point. I mean, where do you even draw the line? It all comes down to this idea of positive cultural significance, which seems incredibly subjective. Who gets to decide what that even means?
You're absolutely right. It is subjective, and that's where things get really tricky. This whole debate isn't really about Tebow versus Smith, is it?
No, I don't think so.
It's a much bigger conversation about who we choose to honor in public spaces and what those choices say about our values as a society. And those values, they change over time, don't they?
They do. And we're seeing this play out all over the country. Statues that were once considered uncontroversial are now being scrutinized and, in some cases, removed or relocated.
Exactly. It's forcing us to ask some tough questions, like, what's the purpose of these statues in the first place? Are they meant to be purely historical, just reflections of the past, even the parts we might not be proud of?
Or should they actively represent our present-day values, even if it means sort of revising our understanding of history?
Right. And that's especially true for the National Statuary Hall. You have to remember, each of those statues was chosen by a state to represent them on a national stage.
Oh, that's right.
So it's not just a collection of random figures. It's a statement about each state's identity, their history, what they value.
So when a state decides to replace a statue, they're making a pretty big statement.
Absolutely. They're saying, this is who we are now.
This is fascinating stuff. I have to admit, I didn't expect the statue swap to open up such a can of worms, but I'm glad we're talking about it. It's an important discussion to have. So out of all of this, what stands out to you as the most significant takeaway?
Well, I think the biggest thing for me is this. We need to accept that our understanding of history is always evolving. What might have been considered a worthy subject for a statue 100 years ago might be viewed completely differently today. And that's not necessarily a bad thing, is it?
No, I don't think so at all.
It means we're engaging with our past, critically examining it through the lens of our present-day values, and that's how we grow.
I love that. And on that note, I'd love to hear from you, our listener. What do you think about all of this? Do you think swapping out Smith's statue for Tebow's is a good idea? What factors do you think should matter most when we decide who deserves to be honored in such a public way?
So that was quite a deep dive. I feel like we just went from halls of Congress to like a philosophy class and back.
But what a conversation, right? And it all started with a simple question. Should Tim Tebow have a statue in the U.S. Capitol?
And we still don't have a clear answer.
Nope, but that's okay. Sometimes asking the right questions is more important than having all the answers.
Very true.
And that's what we're all about here, right? So for all of you listening, here's something to think about as you go about your day. If our values continue to evolve, what criteria should we use to decide who gets immortalized in the public square? That's a big one. I hope you give it some thought. Until next time.
Bye.
See ya.